this year, the topic for the ambassador series for the first session is how can global economy contribute to global peace. The potential contributions of the international business community in the peace process can never be underestimated, and it is high time that we recognize their critical role on peace building.
Thank you very much for coming. My name is Owner Ayan. I'm a portfolio manager. We invest in the countries and we buy the stocks. And Ambassador Wetland and Ambassador Heller, we invested a lot of stocks in your countries. So we are proud to have them. And you should be proud to produce these companies. And first of all, I want to introduce Ambassador Wetland. Ambassador Wetland took up his appointment as permanent representative of Norway to the United Nations in New York in August 2008. He was previously State Secretary at the office of the Prime Minister Stoltenberg, and also before him he was the Secretary at with the Prime Minister Brundtland, so which was an achievement because by considering the two Prime Ministers. And from 1998 to 2003, Ambassador Wetland served as Norway's ambassador to Germany as well. He has also been State Secretary at the Ministry of Industry and Energy, and which is important for our topic because we are going to talk about the global economy and the global peace, how we can attach both of these subjects together. And I would like to start with the first little introduction about Norway. Norway, as you know, is one of the richest countries in the world, and it's $88,000 nominal GDP. The price, the PPP ones are different, but which is the second highest in the world. But don't get me wrong, this comes with a price. This is also a very expensive country, but everything comes with a price. They have a great wealth economy at the same time, with wealth benefits for its citizens. And the Norway's industry is based on the energy companies, shipping companies, and now recently they have introduced biotechnology and medical research, which is very important for all Europe. And Norway is also the third largest oil exporter in the world, and also natural gas. And the largest Norwegian companies are the Norsk Hydro, Statoil, and Telenor. You may know Telenor from the telecom operations in Turkey as well. Norway is not an EU member, but at the same time enjoys the benefits of the European Union trade agreement, free trade, which can be a model for other countries around Europe, especially Turkey as well, which may or may not join the European Political Union, but may join of course, part of the European Trade Union. And now I'm going to give the word to Ambassador Wetland, and after he introduces us a bit about his country's global economy, I would like to continue with some questions.
Thinking only about the security that all small countries have down there, being able to raise all their issues, problems, and if they are subject to aggression, the Security Council, which my colleague from Mexico has served, a country which came out of a Viking age and traded with the world basically in fish, which was the currency that kept us going for centuries, and gradually, with the competition for the resources, naturally the framework provided by the United Nations was the backbone on which we could rely to see to that all these income really were harvested and taxed in Norway, and we were able to have redistributing policies to lift the whole population. Then oil, of course, came in, and with the United Nations Global Steel Treaty, sovereign rights to these resources and the ability to tax and to have long-term sustainable framework conditions attracted international investments. We learned that trade, and we now are exporting oil technology to other countries. I believe one of the reasons why the figures for Norway are the way you say is also the way that we have promoted gender equality in Norway and seen to it that there's a very high level of female participation in the workforce, actually the highest in Europe. We also have the highest birth rate, so we have had policies that makes it possible for women both to pursue a career and to have a family, and thereby sort of using the whole potential of the population and not half of it or close to that. And if you compare our figures with much lower per capita figures for example, Germany, you can find much of the answer in the family policy of that country, which have had the effect of keeping the female ratio in the work stock at a much lower level. US is fine on many of these issues, I believe. What these lucky circumstances, both that we have after World War II have had the United Nations and development of frameworks that has provided the security for countries to develop, has also given us a chance to participate in paying our share to the world to see to it that more countries are pursuing paths which can lead them in the same direction of prosperity, and thereby, of course, serving our own interests, where there will be more and more trading partners out there and more countries coming out of poverty and huge rising middle classes and so on, which also increases markets for us and makes also imports cheaper for Norway. We are one of the winners when it comes to China. China are driving up the prices of our energy exports, and they are producing everything that we don't produce. We got rid of that kind of manufacturing 20 years ago, and so we call it, we're benefiting from a double Chinese growth, the incredibly fall in prices of consumer products, and the relatively high prices on everything that we produce: oil, metals, aluminum, fish, you name it, oil. The European Union. I think European Union should have the Nobel Peace Prize soon. I think it's been overlooked, and that they should really be awarded that one. As we know, United Nations came to be because of trouble in Europe and the barbaric things that happened there during the Second World War, and the level of integration reached there. If we look back a couple of times, we've seen that new countries have always aspired to become members from basis of economic trouble. We know Turkey is aspiring to become a member. Turkey is not marked by the economic trouble, but there are many other good reasons why Turkey naturally is aspiring to that. The fact that you have one common market where individual countries are given up the right to regulate product specifications and so on, which act as barriers to trade, has been the biggest boost to keeping Europeans somehow in the running, even faced with developments in China and along the Pacific coasts and many other places. Norway is not a member of that, but we are part of the European internal market. We did twice in referendum decided not to join by margins of 53 against 47 in favor, so it's been close but clear. Basic reason being that the Europeans have a common fisheries policy, meaning that Brussels defines what kind of fish you can fish where and how and all that. And we think we are much better at doing that. And the shape of the fish stocks prove that we are in fact doing much better in these terms than the others. So the unwillingness to give up control of marine natural resources was a key driver why we thought we would be better on the outside. Also agriculture, which under partly Arctic conditions are not well run by regulations which are functioning wonderfully in Italy and France and so on, under totally different climatic conditions. But we do sort of pay for our membership on relatively high contributions to the Europeans every year, and much of these funds are channeled to the new aspiring members to ease their integration more fully in the European market. I don't want to become too long-winded. We agreed that you would interrupt me if I got off track there.
Actually, one question I would like to add here. After the warnings of not joining the European Union, how does the Norwegians think? Were they thinking that, okay, we were right, or were the fishers disputing with the rest of the population in Europe? What's the psychology after the warnings? The people are happy, or they say you should join?
Well, public opinion polls show that there's a 60% against membership, 40% in favor. So it's been relatively stable. And of course, we have 3% unemployment, whereas Europe has, I don't know what. We have 20% surplus in state finances. Inflation is 1%, and so on. So all our fundamentals are so that I cannot think of what is the problem that we have to which European EU membership is the answer.
One more question I'd like to interrupt you. Maybe we are going to have Q&A from our audience at the end of the talk. But where do you think Norwegian economy will go when China slows down? Or what happens after here when China decides, okay, I'm just not investing that much, I'm not producing output that much. And how do you see Norwegian economy shaping up for the next 10 to 20 years? So there are opinions, of course, none of us have the crystal view.
We will continue as we go. There will be a decline in the oil production, and there will be an increase in the gas production, and the value of these commodities will keep we'll find. Someone said that you're investing in our countries. We are investing all over the place through our sovereign wealth fund, which is the second largest in the world, 500 billion US, and increasing steadily. I think it's a bad policy to decide now what will be the industries of the future. And one of the reasons why we are well off today is that luckily we did not pick the winners 20, 30 years ago, because then we would probably have been dead wrong and wasted a lot of resources on industries that would face trouble. We see that in neighboring Sweden, who are still in car production, and there are layoffs and big problems in the labor market because they stayed too long with the industries that are exposed to direct competition with BRICS countries.
Ambassador Heller is the permanent representative of Mexico to the United Nations since January 2007. Prior to this position, he has served as ambassador to France, Cuba, Slovenia, and Switzerland. And he was also political counselor at the Mexican Embassy in the United States of America, and he was permanent representative to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and also Organization of American States. Most importantly, also, he has served as the head of the Mexican delegations to several international conferences of the United Nations system, the Organization of American States, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, and the Latin American Economic System. Ambassador Heller chaired the Sociology Department at the Metropolitan Autonomous University of Mexico from 1977 to 1979, and he was also professor at Colegio de Mexico. He's author of several books and articles on foreign policy. And also, energy plays a very important role in Mexican economy, and Mexico is the sixth largest oil producer in the world. And other prominent industries are auto industry, cement, telecom, aerospace. And if I ask you which country is the largest smartphone manufacturer in the world, it's not China, it's Mexico. And you see all those Blackberries, they are coming from Mexico. And the exports of Mexico is equal to the sum of exports of Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Uruguay, and Paraguay combined, all of these economies exports. And one more thing, the world's wealthiest person, Carlos Slim, is also from Mexico, and his family migrated from Turkey in 1902 at that time. And now he carried all his wealth to Mexico, and Turkey is a self-made billionaire in the whole world. And also the most important Mexican companies are the CEMEX and Mexican banks and all various kinds of Mexican telecom companies, because obviously the telecom sector is one of the most important ones. And His Excellency, Mr. Ambassador Heller, I'd like to hear about your country and how we can contribute to global peace in the ways of global economic changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for well, you already have said a lot of Mexico, but I will try to address more the general questions about how global economy can contribute to global peace. And of course, the position of the situation of Mexico is a very peculiar one. As you said, Mexico is a North American country, but it's a Latin American country at the same time. It was the first developing country to have a free trade agreement with the US, with the Canada, with NAFTA in 1994. We were the first developing country to become a member of OECD in 1995. We became a member also of APEC in the 90s, and we had a large net of trade agreement with more than 43 countries, including Japan, including Israel, and several Latin American countries. But let me try to address this, the impact of global economy and global peace. In 2003, Goldman Sachs published an essay the title "Dreaming of BRICS: the Path to 2050." Its main thesis is that through embracing the capitalist economic system and supported on the size of their natural resources, population, and technological assets, the countries included in the acronym, Brazil, Russia, India, China, would shift the economic and thus the political balance of the world. Although the BRICS countries have been attracting a high degree of attention, other countries have also been having important growth and consistently increasing their weight in the international economy, that are commonly categorized as emerging economies. We could include among them countries such as Indonesia, Korea, Mexico, Turkey, and Poland, to name a few, taking also into account additional indicators as standards of living, attractiveness for investment, regional influence, resilience to economic shocks, and sound economic management. Without any doubt, the creation of the terms BRICS entailed an opportunity, let's say it like this, for the countries included on the original list. It raised expectation and, of course, the perception of increased political presence. The country concerns have been aiming at capitalizing this perception, understandably, and to actually increase their internal influence. During the last 5 years, at least, those countries have intensified efforts to seek a better coordination among emerging economies, seeking to increase their weight in decision-making, particularly in the most relevant issues for the international economy and the international agenda. The emergence of the G20, which can somehow be understood as an enlargement of the G28 and the G8, is an example of the recognition of the dramatic changes in the international economic balance. The coordinated responses to the recent economic and financial crisis, which made possible to mitigate its worst effects, demonstrates that effective decisions making on international economic issues must go beyond the traditional countries in central of these decision processes. Does this mean that emerging countries, particularly the so-called BRICS, are playing the role that corresponds to their weight in the economic sphere and moreover in the issues pertaining to international security? As an intellectual challenge, I would like to refer to the limits of this coordination capacity. For example, it is worth recalling that despite important coordination among some of those countries identified as emerging economies, the Doha round of trade negotiations has not reached a satisfactory solution. And according to the latest news, the picture does not seem the most favorable for achieving this goal. On matters belonging to peace and security fields, particularly in the context of the discussion on the Security Council reform at the UN, the positions of the so-called emerging powers do not seem to converge. On one side are the permanent members with little incentive to change. On the other hand, some believe that their economic growth, among other factors, justify for them to play a greater role in these issues. While others, such as Mexico, consider that it's necessary to address the challenge of making the Council more democratic, more representative and accountable, and not to perpetuate, much less expand, features less democratic the current system, particularly the veto power. I would also like to note that from my point of view, there is another important difference among the so-called emerging economies, which has to do with the position of the so-called international regimes. International regimes were defined by the American scholar Stephen Krasner as, I quote, implicit or explicit principles, norms, rules, and decision-making procedures around which actors' expectations converge in the given area of international relations, end of quote. Or according to Professor Oral Young, more specialized arrangements that pertain to well-defined activities, resources, or geographical areas, and often involve only some subset of the members of the international society. These arrangements include, for example, the international financial system, Bretton Woods system, the international trade regime around the WTO, and the patent system, to name a few. Critics of international regimes believe that they have been created by the existing hegemonic powers, quoting, in order to perpetuate the benefits they receive from those regimes. The existing international patent system, for example, would be advantageous for large multinational companies like Pfizer or Microsoft, among many other examples. The governance structures of the international financial institutions, which were created after the World War II, are more favorable to these countries that then dominated the international economic scene, and so forth. Obviously, if the system is considered unfair and not conducive to one's economic growth and development, it will not be that accepted as such by those actors that perceive that their interests are affected. The governments of some of these emerging economies seems to consider, or at least they argue, that these international regimes are not fully legitimate in the sense that they perpetuate advantages for developed countries and prevent developing countries to achieve levels of prosperity and hence influence among similar to theirs. These argumentations seems to be a direct heir of the ideological confrontation of the Cold War, and the opposition between North and South seems to have replaced, at least within the UN, the traditional East-West confrontation. In this logic, the right to development of the emerging economies would be a priority, and certainly much more important than complying with those international regimes, or at least the right to development should be fully considered in the implementation of those regimes. However, some issues seems to clearly contradict this logic. For example, in the frame of climate change, that it really seems logical that based on the right to development, or even arguing the deindustrialization of developed countries, we defend the economy's frameworks producing carbon emissions that are clearly unsustainable for maintaining the balance of the entire ecosystem of the planet. Does it make sense to put in the same bag countries with such diverse characteristics as the least developed countries, LDC, or the small island developing states, marginally contributing to climate change, and the largest emitters of carbon in absolute terms, regardless of the relative level development of per capita income? For a country like Mexico, the growing role of the international economic scene is accompanied by the growing sense of responsibility. Would it be on issues such as strengthening the international framework for combating climate change, the harmonization of systems of international cooperation for development, not to be used in political terms, and the strengthening of effective, open, and democratic multilateralism? The coming decades are likely to continue witnessing a shift in the balance of the economy, and thus the influence international affairs, more and more favoring the South and less inclined toward the traditional centers of this decision-making. Such a system can simply change the actors who are on top if we maintain our approach mainly focused on our national objectives and interests from a real political perspective. Or on the contrary, we would move towards cooperation schemes in which our economic weight is also a measure of our commitment to a fair international system, more conducive to equitable development within and among countries, less prone to conflict, and more to collaboration without repeating the abuses of the hegemonic powers that we ourselves have suffered during our history. Countries such as Korea, Mexico, and Turkey can certainly, through its specific weight in both international organizations and in our own regions, play a central role to this regard. Thank you very much.
At two different campuses, and we, based on your comments about what's happening in your country with women really taking a major role in careers because of the opportunities related to childcare and other things that you're given, what would you say are some other highlights of what your country is doing to promote women in careers, and especially maybe in international careers?
I'm sorry, 10 months, and there are additional 2 months available for the father. And the family loses those 2 months unless the father actually takes a leave and looks after the child in that period, which has secured the sort of income of the family and also influenced what is legitimate reasons, how long you can stay out and have a legal claim to be returned to your position. Of board members of listed company have to at least come from one of the sexes, opening up career responsibility for many. There was an uproar at the time, but the early research, which is not totally watertight, but indicate that those countries that have in fact 40% women on the board are doing better economically than those who are so small that they're not covered by that law. So there's a good return on that, and we also have some from adjustment. Women who perform well in mathematics gets extra points to take for entering into universities. And then there is policy, like state recruitment policy. The composition of the cabinet is a symbolic thing, but it gradually affects the composition between the genders in the public sector. Private sector is not that well off, but this has become part of corporate accounting and reporting, and it's part of the annual report of any company. What kind of gender policy have they actually put in place? So there.
Thank you.
Where Libya, I think we cannot have an answer. There is a conflict going on. The H.E process is not over yet. No? It's going to apparently in the good direction of democratization, but we have to see what will be the end of the story of these chapters. No? But I will make a comparison with Latin America. Latin America, especially in the 80s, after dictatorships, military dictatorships, was the decade of democratization of the political system, of building new political democratic system, or recovering the democracy. I think in the case of Latin America, there was much more concerns in the past on stability. So how do you reconcile economic and social development with political development? I think that the main threats, the regimes that in many cases, or some cases, relied on.
If you study that, you can see then what are some of the deficiencies in these countries. And the educational sector is clearly one which has been, there has been a steady underinvestment in the educational sector for a very, very long period of time. And also the indicators for what we in Norway call gender equality, which is called equal opportunity, women's empowerment, are very poor. And it doesn't take a long calculation to see that this will not create much, will be unleashing the potential of that country if you have such policy over a long period of time. It will, and also the information, freedom of information is tracking relatively low by international comparisons. And this is, if you add one match to that, it will light up. Well, if it had been for that fruit vendor in Tunisia, we might have discussing abstract situations for another decade maybe. We don't know what would have happened then. But the fundamentals I just mentioned, education, freedom of information, and we could go on with corruption and so on. But if we talk about corruption, I think we should look at how to give people opportunities through the educational system and the fact that you empower women more and provide more freedom on that level of society.
Having a lot of natural resources can have disadvantages for an economy. There's a term, oil's curse, if I'm not misremembering. I think the idea is that in the long run, if you have a lot of natural resources, then the economy does not improve its competitiveness in other areas. And actually, if you look over the world, I think this generalization holds. The other thing is countries with lots of natural resources tend to be ruled by autocratic regimes. Now, Norway is different. It's an advanced country, it has an advanced economy and a democratic country. My question is, what is different about Norway?
Other resources than oil, and taxing them, and taxing, for example, cheap hydropower to the benefit of the whole of society. So we had rehearsed running the economy before we had any idea that there would be oil outside Norway. And then we were late, and we could learn from mistakes made other places. And luckily, there was one decisive point, and that was that we have done something which rarely happens. We have managed not to spend money which is available. And in a democracy where there will be unmet needs all around, in the health sector, in the education sector, infrastructure, you name it, there will always be a pressure to spend too much money in a national economy. Had we done that, we would have a double-digit inflation, and we would be a basket case. But we have had a political culture which has confined the use of oil revenue to what the economy as such can tolerate without being run out of business and making all the other sectors uncompetitive. And the surplus which we don't spend, that goes into that sovereign wealth fund which I mentioned. Also, I think the absence of corruption is important, and a solid taxation, which is I mean, one thing that actually only we do and that none of the others do, and there's a lot of things that the others do. Look, the oil in Angola, Nigeria, and so on, and it doesn't seem to benefit everybody so well. But one thing that only we do is called norm price taxing oil. And that means the government decides what a company producing oil will have sold their oil for. Let's say today that the government decides that this company running that field, they should be able to sell their oil in the last quarter for $100 a barrel, and the tax rate is 78%, so $78, thank you. If the company says, well, we only got 80, we couldn't, so you still have to pay 78% of 100, because that was, in the opinion of the oil analysts of the Ministry of Finance, the obtainable price. And don't try to cheat us by mispricing and taking out the profit in the Cayman Islands or anywhere. We never take positions above 2% in any company. And we have a set of ethical guidelines which requires the company in which we invest to report on a set of ethical principles. And we kick them out of the portfolio if they do not report. And it was an uproar a couple of years ago when we kicked out Walmart because of child labor further down the delivery chain. And likewise, if they don't report accordingly in conjunction with the ethical guidelines for investment, which we expel them. And that's not so good for their stock value, because this is not going to disrupt market, but other investors take the lead from what such a foreign fund is doing. Well, we should, we report on, there's a annual report from the sovereign wealth fund, how they apply their investment rules and their ethical guidelines. And as we see in the private sector, that will be setting a standard, even if it's not legally binding for anyone else. It's a set an investment standard, and you will be measured against that.
How would you envision Mexico having a greater role in international affairs, in politics, just around the world? Because we know what's going on, but I think a lot of Americans are not as familiar with the role that Mexico is having economically as well as an international player.
Latin American Union, that it's still in process of negotiation, which is a very complex process of negotiation taken into account the different approaches, I would say, from countries like Venezuela or Cuba or Nicaragua or Bolivia to other countries like Brazil or Chile in a certain sense, or Argentina, Mexico plays, I would say, and then also in the UN context, I would say, a bridge role in trying to approach positions. No? And approach positions on the basis of, in the UN system, we believe in the Charter of the UN, we believe in the international law, the rule of law, so we want to apply to this roles. As I said at the beginning, we have also the advantage that we are not part of the larger groups. We are not part of the G77 of the developing countries, and this can give us some leverage to play to reach positions on issues of sustainable development or climate change or many other of these issues. We believe that there's a need of reform of the international system. What we have said, especially on the peace and security issues on the Security Council, is that of course the Security Council has to be reformed. We cannot depend on the structure that was created under 1945 conditions. But at the same time, it's the terms of this reform that are really at stake. We don't believe that the creation of new permanent members at the Security Council is a good solution for the international system, because we think it's very important to have some accountability of new actors. We don't want to give a blank check to Brazil, India, Japan, or Germany, or any other country, if there is not a process of accountability that will be present. So we believe that re-election could be a possibility. Extended mandates in the UN system, the Security Council reform would be more feasible and realistic in expecting these terms. No? But we are right now in a very complex, I would say, international situation. No? So it's very clear that it's not going to come from a general agreement, because there are no conditions for general agreements.
Erdogan's statement about Gaddafi would have some positive effect on getting him out, or what is your opinion?
The first one, claiming the protection of civilians, has referred the name of Gaddafi and people, his family or his government, to the International Court, Criminal Court, and in 1973, in order to try to put an end to violence on the field, has called for the creation of a non-fly zone in order to deter the use of violence. But the fact is that there is a conflict going on, and this is not over. And of course, the future of Gaddafi and the future of the regime are at the center of the debate. No? But the international legality right now, I would say, it's based on the Security Council